Are we just talking about rail or no, aviation and rail?
Okay, I'm gonna run through both if that's
Yeah,
okay.
no, it's fine. So this is Senate Transportation. It's Wednesday, February 7th. We're have a delivery from the agency of transportation who talks about and is in charge of both aviation and rail services for Vermont. So we're going to go over those programs in the 25 program.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, to repeat, Dan DeLabriere. I'm the Rail and Aviation Bureau Director for VTrans. This morning, I'm going to refer to the white book that you guys got, tabs number 10 and tabs number 11. I'll start on aviation and kind of do a quick overview of, I won't go through line by line, but unless you want me to, but I will kind of give you the highlights of the budget and tell you what we're up to as far as projects, because it's really a project-based, both aviation and rail, they're project-based budgets. So I'll talk about some of the projects. So we have, as you know, quick overview, there's 10 state airports that we manage, and so this budget would cover all maintenance and all activities at all 10 state airports. But I'll give you some highlights on projects at certain airports. So start right at the top. We've got Bennington Airport. We've got several larger projects this coming year. One of them is
do you have a presentation this year, or no,
just the budget? The budget sheet. Did you want more of an overview? No. Okay, I was told that this was what you wanted.
This is fine.
Okay,
we've all heard the overview.
Yeah, 10 times, right?
3 times, yeah. Although I know Senator Maz is going to ask you about why the airports don't make more money.
There you go. I want to know what happened in Caledonia.
Hey, easy.
I actually can't really talk too much about Caledonia right now. There's some negotiation stuff going on.
And are we thinking, because that
was going on with the what was the name of that outfit?
Yeah, Carl.
Yeah. That was they were going to take that over last year or so.
Well, they're still talking.
Okay.
Because there seemed to be a hurry up. Is it just like a hurry up and wait kind of scenario? Like we passed that law last year at the end of the session. Like we got to get this done. But then how are your
Sorry, I can't talk a lot about it, but the hurry up was to get the RFP out on to get proposals, to ask for proposals,
and to get permission
to go out for those proposals. Yeah. So we are, without talking too much, it's in the process is continuing. So yeah. So back to the budget. There's 30 aviation projects in this budget. In Bennington, the apron itself down there, that's one of our larger projects. We're going to dig that apron completely up and repave the entire. It's a large apron down there. It's really terrible. We've been having prop strikes because it's so bumpy. There's prop strikes, and that's not good, right? It ruins the prop. It just, you're done. Yeah. So if the planes go too fast, it's the bump, so if they go slow, it's fine, but some guys come in a little hot and they go a little too fast on the apron. And so anyway, long story short is we did get some federal money for that. So we have a grant, and this summer we'll be redoing that apron completely down there. And then we still have our normal stuff that we do as far as navigation easements and obstructions. Every year we look at the ends of the runways and see if there's trees sticking up, and if we have to go to the property owner next door and get permission to go on their property and cut some trees and things like that. So
is the EMAS building declared in the snow shed, the shed for the truck?
No, so when I get down there, I'll talk about that. So so that's Rutland, right? So well, let me go down there. So so I can go right to Rutland. So we also have a big project. There's kind of two things going on in Rutland. So the main runway, it's a 5,000-foot runway by 100 feet wide. That main runway is going to be resurfaced this coming summer. So there's actually going to be a closure of the main runway this summer. which means Cape Air will be suspended for a bit because the crosswind runway is not long enough for them to function. So we're gonna actually suspend our passenger service there for a bit this summer.
That's $4.9 million just to resurface the runway.
Yes. And
It's
that
just resurfacing, it's not like a reconstruction.
no, it's somewhere in the middle. So we're gonna take most of the surface off, and then start over. We're not gonna get down into the sub base, but it's not just like it's not like a 1-inch mill or something. It's, we're going a little bit deeper than that, but yeah, no, it's expensive.
Is the airport
And that's,
paving
so it's not,
per foot a lot more expensive than highway?
yeah, so that runway is grooved pavement, so they're gonna have to go back and they're gonna have to groove that whole runway, for traction. So that's, it's not just paving and painting it. So then we gotta line stripe all that whole thing and put the stop bars in and all that stuff. So it's not just like digging or milling it off and paving it over. It's quite a bit of work, and there's an intersection of a crosswind runway, so.
But the feds are bidding for it, so.
Yeah, so that one, what was nice about that one was we got some discretionary money, so that one ended up being the grant we applied for 100% federal funding. Normally there's a state match, but that one, because of the IIJA bill from Washington, there's extra funding in the FAA budget, so we ended up getting 100% funding for that rehab of that runway, so that was nice. What the EMAS is, so at the end of that runway, the topography of that airport, at the end of the runway, it drops off. It's like, I don't know, 150-foot drop off at the end. So what there is there's this thing called the EMAS, which is engineered material arresting system. It's like a truck runaway ramp, right? So if a plane gets to the end of the runway and can't stop, it goes into the EMAS, and that stops the plane before it goes over the bank on the end. So we have EMAS maintenance that's due. We got a couple blocks in there that we're testing. We're not sure if we got to replace them or not. We know all the, so it's a bunch of blocks basically, and then there's almost like a caulking. It's an engineered material, but it's like a caulking between each block. We got to redo all the caulking in every block. So it's, while we have the runway shut down, we're going to do the EMAS maintenance.
Okay.
So we don't have to shut the runway down again.
Did we ever do the shed for the?
No, so that's in 24's budget right now. That's in the current budget. This past year, we got bids. They came in 100% over budget.
Oh, Jesus.
So, approximately 100%. So we are now going back out to bid. It should go to construction this spring. So it should be still in 24 budget, but we kind of changed a couple of things, how we're going about bidding it, which we think is going to actually help with we only had one bid, and then, so we're going to we're going to put the word out a little better. So we have more competition on that building. It shouldn't be, it's a shed. It's not shouldn't cost what that bid came in at. So anyhow, that's in this year's budget.
Okay.
Another project in Rutland is there's another apron project there. So right in front of the terminal where Cape Air comes in, that apron starting to get bumpy and big cracks. So we're actually going to do, this is not a big rehab. This is more of a mill and overlay there. So a little less, but it's a large area. So that's the terminal apron project in Rutland.
Yes.
So with Cape Air there, they still have to have all the security and all of that, FAA,
TSA.
TSA,
Yep.
and all that. Okay.
Yeah, they go through the whole baggage.
And there,
thing.
Cape Air is the only commercial,
Scheduled service. It's the only scheduled service that we have at a state airport.
Are they flying every day?
To Boston 3 times. Yep.
Nice.
back and forth.
Nice.
Yep. So yeah, no, that's going well. We do also have a lot of charter service, which is unscheduled, right? So you can go out and charter a plane and come into any one of our airports. There's a significant amount of charter service, Rutland, Morrisville, Newport, so quite a bit Knapp here. So those airports have a lot of charter service. There's some in Springfield, some in Bennington, but not a lot, as much as, Stowe, Newport,
I've landed in Nap and Morrisville.
I have a question.
Yes, Senator Richard.
Any type of reports on the overall employments of charter services? Are we seeing a general trend? And I only want to overlay that with the notion that we might be letting go of an airport facility. But are we seeing overall the increased aviation traffic and chartered flights across the state and all of our airports?
No, I would say, well, the Cape Air service, I would say it sort of maintains a steady state as far as passengers. We haven't seen a lot of up or down in the employments there. There is nationally, there's a bit of a decline in what's called GA traffic, so general aviation, the recreational traffic. There's not a lot of, I shouldn't say not a lot. There's not as many new pilots as there are old pilots going out. So the number of GA pilots nationwide, not just in Vermont, is declining. Now, airport technology like the beta, that's generating kind of a new spark for younger pilots. It's the analogy would be more like a video game, right? You've got, it's the new technology, whatever. So
Right.
there are younger pilots looking at that technology as opposed to, flying the old Cessna 172, which is, the old plane. So
Senator Mazza's question.
Yeah, do prices fluctuate like the commercial airlines on a daily basis? One day it's 500, next day it's 300. Are they more consistent for like Cape Air, places like that? Because nationally, you're a big airline. You call today, it's $600, and you call Thursday, it's $400. Do they fluctuate, or are they more stable?
So they do fluctuate, although I will say that the Cape Air flights this is a federally subsidized program, so it fluctuates, but not as much
Okay.
for the air service.
Senator Collmore flies out of there all the time. Anytime he's going to Florida, he flies Cape Air to Boston and Boston direct. Yeah, and he says it's just a wonderful service.
It's quick.
Yeah, he had talked about the price. The price was very reasonable.
Yeah, no, Cape Air's doing, well. I mean, they've been doing well for years. It's the same sort of, so there's 9 seats on the plane. That's it. So 3 times a day, back and forth. So.
Can I ask is the Highgate aviation easement, is that the one where during the summer there had to be, I think Joey Fiscal or somebody had to provide some language or money?
No, that was in 24's. There was an easement for the, so there's a bunch there's a whole bunch of easements there, okay? In Highgate, because of the project. There's the project where so
You're doing an extension.
We're doing a 1,000-foot extension there. So this past summer, we did the main runway as it existed, so 3,000 feet. We tore it all up, redid it, and we expanded it 15 feet wider. So now it's 3,000 by 75 feet wide. This summer, and we had to do it this way because of the FAA funding buckets. They gave us so much one year, so much the next year. They wouldn't give it to us all at the same time. So this year's project is, we're taking that 3,000 by 75 and we're adding 1,000 feet to it. We're also adding a parallel taxiway off the new end, off the 1,000-foot end, so it brings it back into the apron. But when you go 1,000 extra feet, the approach surface to that end of the runway, we have to get navigation easements. And there's different ones. So there's the approach path, and then there's what's called the Part 77. And so we get those sort of at different times. Like you actually have to keep the approach path, absolutely clear. Part 77, you can have some obstructions, but it's different. Think of it like a football stadium, right? So you've got obstructions. It's further away from the airport, the higher those trees can be. Well, on the sides, it's a little different, but the approach path has to be. So anyway, last year's was about 1,000 foot. We had to certify to the FAA that we had the easements for the approach surface before they give us the money for this 1,000 feet. Now we're going to go out for the navigation easements for the side, which is what's in here. So it's a little different.
Okay, because that was already happened.
Yeah.
Because there was there was an urgency to it because you needed to get the federal money. This thing
There was a
happened last
time
summer.
clock, there was a time clock on this 1,000-foot money. And we had to sign off to the FAA that, we had the navigation easements on that 1,000-foot. And if we didn't have that, this money was gonna expire.
And you had to get the easements by buying the land.
Yeah, that's basically, so now that's what a navigation easement is. You go buy the rights, you have to go buy the rights to that property so you can go on there and cut the trees or whatever you gotta
But
do.
sometimes can you just get an actual easement or something?
You can, this particular piece of land was like right at the end of the runway.
Are you talking about the one that we just settled where they had to go buy land for the airport?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know that you guys are talking about the same thing. Did you just have to buy because of we're ag land and all that? Didn't we have to,
Well, it didn't have
didn't we
anything
have
to
to
do
make
with
a
ag.
decision? Didn't we have to make a decision like fairly quickly that they made this summer? Is that what you're?
Yes, I
Okay.
think that's what Senator.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the same
And
thing.
that, since Kitchell isn't here, I think she had.
Right, she
talked
would have
about
it, you know.
But that's just to clarify, that was in the 20,
Yeah.
that was 24.
Makes sense.
It
Right.
exists.
Now we're talking about
Now we're talking about 25.
But that's all done, like,
Yes,
and now the state owns 100 acres or something.
yeah, I don't remember how many acres it is.
And do you ever buy the lot, but you really don't sell some of it because you only need part of it?
We're still trying to figure that out, right? So, yeah, so not every acre that was purchased, was needed for the approach surface. Some of it's needed for part 77, but not all of it that was purchased, is required for an easement.
So you might,
Well, yeah, we're looking
you
at
try to
it.
sell it.
We're looking at what's the best thing to
Okay.
do there,
I
but.
know a real estate agent,
The,
you're looking for one.
The seller was not interested in subdividing it into pieces that we needed and not.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, that's another one of our big projects. So the Franklin County Airport will be closed for a portion of this summer, although we have the project broken up into stages where the existing runway that we built last year will stay open for a period of time while we do some of the others. So it will impact the use of that airport, but not as significant as we did last year, where the entire airport was closed almost all summer. So those are our kind of the biggest projects. We've got Highgate, we've got Rutland Runway, and we've got Bennington Apron, Rutland Apron. So some fairly significant projects on the aviation side. In Middlebury right now, our fuel farm failed last year, so we're in the process of, there's no fuel as far as self-serve there.
So what does that mean if it fails?
The tank, we have to test the fuel, and what was happening was, we found particulates in the fuel. Well, after investigating how is that getting in there, it was because the interior lining of the tank was deteriorating to the point where it has an expected life. It was not at the end of the expected life. We figured we had another 3, 4, 5 years at least, and it failed last year. So it wasn't safe to sell fuel out of that fuel farm. So we shut it down.
Above ground tanks.
That was below ground. We have since removed everything from the tank. We actually cleaned the tank before, and now we've actually taken that tank out of the ground and it's gone. So there's no tank there at all. The new one will be above ground.
And it's a fuel farm, but it was just one tank.
It's only avgas. Yeah, that one has avgas. So generally the larger airports will have 100 low lead avgas, or they'll have, and they'll Jet A. So that's what the larger ones have, 2 types of fuel. This Middlebury, there's only avgas, so 1 tank.
It's more like a fuel garden than a farm.
Sure. Yeah. And then we're
And that has to be all state funding because
it's not eligible for FAA funds. Yeah, so that's not, yeah, FAA has that in their handbook, that fuel farms are, because it generates revenue, not enough to pay for itself, but it does generate revenue. Anything that generates revenue isn't eligible for
it
funds.
is the environmental assessment around that underground fuel tank.
No, the environmental assessment's already been done on that. This environmental assessment is, we're looking at, in the future, a new terminal. if you've ever been to Middlebury, there's
I
the
mean, in the middle, right? Not the
airport, yeah. So there's the maintenance hangar, and within that maintenance hangar, there's this little tiny office over to the side that we call a terminal. It's not much. So we're looking at whether a terminal is something that we want to put into the program. And FAA says you have to do an environmental assessment before you can start looking at it. So. And then the last big thing is down at the bottom, Springfield. We are, that's our, it's not, I mean, we are doing engineering in this budget, but the next big project that we're looking at in the future, in future budgets, is that runway, which is the second longest runway in the state, Burlington. That runway is at the end of its useful life. And so that runway will be completely rebuilt. Hopefully in the next couple of years. So that's kind of our next future project.
Can you remind me about the BTV match?
Yes.
For Senator Chitten's favorite non-state-owned airport?
It's my favorite.
Your favorite. So what the requirement there is, in regulations, it says if an airport generates revenue, whatever tax revenue, so it's fuel tax basically, that fuel tax has to be reinvested back into the aviation program. So how we do it is we figure out approximately what their annual fuel revenue is
From BTV?
from BTV.
Or are we now calling it Lady? What was?
Well, I think it's,
Burlington.
yeah, but I think the code is still BTV. Anyway, so we say, all right, so if it's generates $480,000, $490,000, we round it up and say $500,000, and then they send us their projects, and we match. We do like our state match to their federal money, and that's how we kind of put that revenue generated tax income back into the airport.
Is it just but then they use it they'll use that for their match?
Yeah, so they actually submit to us, we don't just write them a check for 500. They actually submit to us projects that they're doing, the actual bids, and then we look at that and say, okay, the state match or match, but your match is typically it's 90-10, so 10% of that federal money, and we use that out of this budget to match their federal money.
But it's just in here, it's listed as a lump sum,
Yes.
even though there's projects behind it.
Correct.
Since they're not on state airport, we don't do it. And so if they sell more fuel, they get more.
Yeah, so we don't analyze that like every minute to say,
Yeah.
we just, we check it out and we say, okay, it's gonna be about this much based on, based on the past year, and we estimate it to be that much, so.
Okay, so there shouldn't.
This is my favorite topic. So you get an approval process on these projects?
We have review, we could, but we don't typically get into that level of saying, we don't want you to do that project.
Well, the longest serving mayor of Burlington is not running for reelection. There will be a new administration after a long time. So who knows what the next mayor would be. And if that new mayor wanted to come in and do some things, you would still have the right to not approve a project to say turn the farm field into or turn the airport.
I suppose technically we could say we're not going to use our money to match that project. But typically what's happened in history here is that they've had some pretty good projects. So it hasn't been difficult for us to match that or say yes to those. The runway reconfiguration that they had in the last few years, it was a safety issue. It's kind of a no-brainer that we match that. So
I guess my point is just you have the ability to say no to the project.
we have the ability to not send them the money for that project. To match it.
But you're required to give them the money back some way.
Yeah. We have to invest in that airport, right? So
Senator Mazza.
One of the things that always concerned me is the fact that it's in South Burlington, but yet there's always been a battle. Burlington always controls it. And yet in South Burlington has nothing to say about it, basically. I don't know if that's got any better or worse, but that was a concern of mine for years and years and years, because South Burlington had nothing to say, yet it's located there, but yet Burlington gets the benefit. And when I questioned many times what the revenue was, I never could get an answer of what it generates for Burlington financially. So that's still a question I've always had, and I don't know who can answer that someday.
I really appreciate that comment, sir. And I do think it has gotten better. I think the F-35 decision was very controversial, and there was a lot of questions about the decision making. And I still am of the opinion that it should not be a department of the municipality of Burlington, and it should be managed by a regional authority. But I also
That's what you're right. Exactly. That's exactly what I always figure. Why would Burlington control it? It's not even in Burlington, and yet they have everything to say about it. And this has been an issue of mine for a long time, and South Burlington, they never wanted to involve South Burlington or regional or Winooski or wherever. And I don't think that's ever going to change, but I don't know who could change it or how it's changed. I don't know, but I've never had any result.
There is a board that,
it's the airport commission, but it has been weakened since 2003. My point, we've gone over this, and what I think it's going to take is if a new mayor comes in and wants to do something crazy, wants to turn the airfield into a cornfield or something, then I think we'll revisit governance and decision making. But until then, I'm just sort of accepting of the status quo, be resigned to it.
Right.
Down the path of that discussion last year, and I thought it was a very good discussion that we had, and I shared Senator Mazza's concern and yours as well. I think that any time that you designate an airport, an international airport, and then you have a municipality that's making the decisions and deriving income out of it, I think it's always something that needs to be looked at. But again,
My favorite topic.
I think Dan wants to weigh in.
I do not. Thank you,
Yeah,
though.
Dan, what's your spin, Dan? What's your spin?
I do not have.
his spin is on to the next topic.
We're just trying to get you. Okay,
So that's the aviation budget highlights. Again, pretty busy budget. We have a lot going on. There's a lot of big projects.
Guess
here.
you're off topic, but Coventry.
Oh, I skipped over the terminal.
We had you jumping around a little bit, but we have the terminal in Coventry.
Yes, so it'll be a new terminal building. We got a Northern Borders grant for that. We will be breaking ground for that this summer. Yeah, long time coming. That terminal is old. You've been in it.
It's not even a terminal.
It's it's a block building that
who's flying in and out of there? Same with Highgate, like what kind of traffic are those two?
Highgate's busy. Highgate, see, the thing about Highgate is it's just north of Burlington. So a lot of people like the general aviation pilots, they won't fly out of Burlington because it's a kind of a pain with the tower and everything like that. They can just go up to Highgate. There's no tower. They can go in and out.
So it's general aviation in both of those airports, and Highgate's is more because there's more people around.
Yeah. Highgate's busy. Newport's busy certain times a year.
When you say Newport, it's
Coventry,
actually
sorry.
Coventry, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm a Northeast Kingdom guy.
Yeah.
I was calling Newport Airport.
Okay.
All right. If we can move on to rail, I'm going to try to keep us on
Rail.
target for time because I know at 10, Railroad Association is coming in. I'm going to help them with their one presentation.
One question on rail.
Yeah.
When can I get on a train in Burlington or Essex and get off in Montreal?
Let's talk about that. So before we get into the budget, so we have been.
Here's a month. There's some money in here for it.
Yeah, so that's the next step. So we have been working with Amtrak, State of New York, the province of Quebec on a feasibility study that's going to give us, okay, so very complicated. So what we need to get is a pre-clearance facility built in Montreal. It doesn't make sense for us to run the train before we get that. New York right now is not running their train on the Adirondack side. It doesn't have everything to do with pre-clearance, but it's a factor. If you can drive your car, get through the border, get to Montreal quicker than a train, no one's going to ride the train. So the pre-clearance facility,
College kids. Sorry, go ahead.
potentially,
Train fans.
train fans, yes. Is that enough to support the train? Financially. So the pre-clearance facility to us is the key to getting that train. So we have a feasibility study that the province of Quebec is currently working on. It was due in the fall. They have had some delays with their interactions with the border protection agencies on both sides of the border. So Canadian, it's what they have to do is they're designing this thing, or high level design, it's not really design. Will this space, is this enough square footage for you? It doesn't really design the space, but is this, so anyway, the regulations in the spec book changed from the one we did years ago. We are expecting that this feasibility study will be done any minute. I'm on the bi-weekly call to Montreal, with Montreal, Amtrak, New York. And we're pushing hard, and there is a lot of support on the Canadian side for this now. It kind of stopped for a minute. Now we're back with the current administration. So I don't have an answer, like a calendar date. I will tell you when it's moving. The next thing we have to do is, once we figure out what's it going to cost, is it actually feasible to put a pre-clearance facility in Montreal? What's it going to cost? Who's going to pay what costs, right? So that's the kind of the next.
So this study will give you the cost?
It's going to give us a ballpark. This is what it's going to cost. And then, like New York, Amtrak, customs on both sides of the border, we're all going to have to sit at the table and say, your piece of the pie, your piece of the pie, your piece of the pie. Are you willing to continue with this project? Because now we have a ballpark idea.
And this is a consultant?
It's a consultant on the Canadian side. So my counterpart in the province of Quebec, basically what's it called? Transport Ministry, whatever, Quebec, whatever that is, MTQ. Anyway, they are the ones running the study, and they're paying for the study. We paid for one years and years ago or we paid $50,000 as our part, but it's not. It needs to be done.
Because the fact they're paying for the study is pretty encouraging.
They're committed, right? So the next step is going to go from feasibility study to scoping the design. And that's what I put in the budget is.
This is our portion of that.
I don't know. Honestly, Senator, I made up a number here.
Yeah. Okay.
This is not an exact, I put in a placeholder for our potential piece of the next step. The good news is there's a next step, right? We're at the point where we're about to take the next step. The other good news is, I don't know if you've seen nationally, the federal government, the FRA, Federal Rail Administration, this past year said, we want to get a handle on nationally our passenger rail network. So they sent out, basically they sent out to all Amtrak current routes. You don't even have to be an Amtrak. If you had a passenger rail service, like out west, there's some that aren't Amtrak. And they said, we want to get a handle on passenger corridors as the network. What's the total network? We submitted 3 applications. We submitted our current Vermonter service with the extension to Montreal. We submitted the current Ethan Allen with the extension over to Essex. We submitted what we called the Green Mountain Corridor, which would be an additional service of the Ethan Allen starting in Burlington, but don't go over in Rutland. Once you get to Rutland, don't go to New York. Keep going down the western side, all the way down to Bennington. Right, so that's in this, right? So we submitted 3 applications. The FRA came back and said, we're not gonna give you 3, but we'll give you 2. However, in your Ethan Allen application, we're gonna combine the Green Mountain. So we right now just got, and I just a week and a half ago had our kickoff meeting with the FRA. We don't have the money yet, but we have the award notice. We got $500,000 for the Ethan Allen corridor and $500,000 for the Vermont corridor to eventually get to what's called a service development plan. That's going to talk about what your service looks like, what you want your service to look like in the future, all the projects that it's going to take to get those, maintain that service over the years. And we're going to set ourselves up for they're setting up a federal budget bucket of money specifically for what they're calling corridor ID passenger network. So if you're in that network, there's going to be a special bucket for that. Again, we just got $1 million for our, basically everything we asked for we got, which was nice. But this is a several year process to get to a service development plan for each one of those, but it's gonna set Vermont up very well for the future for these. And I applaud the federal government for saying, all right, let's get our hand around the national network as opposed to just piecemealing each one of these services individually. Let's get
That
it.
connection to Ethan Allen to Essex is important because the train to Montreal has to go out of Essex.
Yeah, right. You can't get from Burlington to Montreal without going to Essex.
When we see connectors in terrible enough condition that you can't get Amtrak trains to go through at a speed that they require.
Well, it's speed, it's track safety. There's crossings that don't meet a standard for passenger service. It's exactly what it is. It's a freight service that travels 15 miles an hour. We want the passenger train to be faster than 15 miles an hour.
It does seem, you know, from the time that I've been on this committee and, you know, always going through these with you, that the federal government is recognizing Vermont's commitment to rail. It just seems like, you know, you're getting more of what you want to ask for. I mean, looking at the success of getting the, you know, the train to New York on a straighter path. And it just seems like you know, the commitment that you're getting from Canada, which isn't our federal government, but it just seems like, you know, the federal government does recognize. I mean, you look at New Hampshire, I mean, I don't think they're doing much with rail. You look at, maybe we're in a strategic corridor of where we are, you know, with the straight shots right down to New York City and a straight shot to Montreal. But it seems like that we are, I don't know, being recognized or rewarded, or it seems like we're a pretty big conversation in the federal part of rail.
We've been lucky. We've been fortunate. Now, we are very active with our federal partners, our federal delegation, who have done very well for Vermont. Because all these grants that we talk about, obviously, our federal delegation goes and fights for us about this. We at VTrans have very frequent conversations with our federal delegation on why it's important. So I applaud our federal delegation. They've been very successful and they've done well for Vermont.
If I could pick up on that, I just, and I love our current federal delegation, they have my full support, but I believe there was some sentiment raised, I might have been with the secretary. Are you worried that our luck is running out with no longer having Patrick Leahy, the pro tem, in our corner, so to speak?
You know, we don't know that yet. We're still successful currently. We'll see what happens in the future. I don't have a comment on what it's going to be in the future, but certainly Senator Leahy was, yeah, he was very successful, which made us successful. So, yeah, that's great. All right, I'm not gonna hit everything, but the highlights in this budget, are basically, speaking of federal, money, we are still working through what is called our build grant. That's the Rutland down to Hoosick, New York. There's 19 projects in this budget that are build projects. This budget will be the
Are they
final.
all bridges?
They're all bridges, yeah. So when we're done, and this should be the last budget that you see a build project in, because we are at the end of there's a timeline for using this federal money. We're gonna be at the end of it this next calendar year. So, yeah, so we should be all done with our, it's not this, it's 25. So at the end of that calendar year. So, we will be done, all those bridges, so 29 total bridges when we're all done, will be at 286,000 pounds, 40 miles an hour. That's huge for that corridor. Our next grant that we're about to apply for, hopefully, is that same corridor replacing the rail itself. Okay, so there's what's called 90-pound rail. It's really old, it's small. It's actually what we had out here. So that needs to be replaced. So that's one of the next grants we'll be talking to our federal.
And that'll help when we do get this.
And that corridor ID, that's critical. That's one of the critical pieces is the actual track, because that'll now be continuously welded rail. It'll be a thicker, heavier gauge rail, able to handle faster trains. So that's what we're looking for there. That doesn't get us there. I mean, we still have crossing safety and all that stuff to look at, signals. So that's, but these are steps. You take baby steps to get to where your goal is. So bridges, track, two of the bigger steps.
Okay, can I ask you about my favorite, railroad subsidy for the
Yes,
whacker?
that's out right out here, yes.
So is it 260, is that kind of what it's been? You know, there was talk that we had hoped it would get reduced with the increased use of this track
Right, so this is the same number that we've been carrying in that
for years.
for years, and this number could change. So we get billed monthly based on, so it won't change for the first several months, but towards the end of the year, when you start looking at revenue generated on there, that's when you start trying to figure out, is their income level higher than, you know, does it take the next step so that that month can be reduced? We haven't gotten there yet, but I will tell you that
Is the revenue increasing? Because it,
they are moving, they moved trains yesterday. And here we are in February, and they haven't moved a train through this rail line in the winter. They generally shut it down because they can't get up the hill.
right,
But they were moving trains yesterday, so, you know, it's busier. It's busier,
It does seem
it's busier
busier.
than I've ever seen it.
but not busy enough to give us any money.
Not yet.
And this is, so when they bid, since it's our, however so often we put it out to bid, right?
No,
Basically.
no. So they have a lease on that. It's, I think, 30 years or something.
Oh, it's like a 30.
Yeah, it's a long term lease.
And that's, so it's only negotiated, there's not like every so many years, we relook at the terms.
Every 5 years, you don't reopen the terms, but every 5 years, you have to look at a renewal process, which goes back and says, yes, they're meeting all the criteria that's in the lease. So
As long as
it's
they're meeting the
reviewed.
requirements. they
Yeah,
can-
as long as they meet the requirements, then that gets
And
renewed.
as far as what their revenue is, they just report it, it's
They report it.
self-reporting.
It is.
County
Yeah,
honors.
we don't go into their books and look, you know, it's reported. They're required to send us reports.
So they're hauling, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, is there any ever talk about,
Doing an audit.
yeah. just
Yeah, I don't
making
know,
sure,
we haven't-
or
we
you
haven't-
just don't think there's a opportunity there, or you just trust them, or?
Well, so far, they haven't given us a reason, so, I mean, we have a very good relationship with the railroad, I mean, it seems like,
And do they
it's an open
report
book,
train
really.
traffic?
I'm
Like,
sorry. I
do
missed that.
they report the traffic, so you would kind of look at what they're reporting?
We don't
for
get that,
revenue?
like, well, we get it more of a generic monthly report, not as there was this many cars, we don't get that
I
granular.
just didn't know if you had something to cross-check what they're saying their revenue is, or is it just totally a trust?
Well, I guess the answer to that is there is some trust there. I don't know that they've given us a reason not to. So certainly we can see, I mean, our office is in Barry. We
Yeah.
can see the activity. I mean, it's definitely increased. So
I don't have any reason to, question that they're not giving accurate information, but we just don't, I just wonder if dealing with state contracts and
Yeah.
things everyone else, like,
it's a good question.
we wouldn't do that for anything else, or at least that I can think of. Where we just say, you tell us, let us know if you owe us any money,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
But I guess it's a different. Senator Eagles.
They're hauling just more than granite. I mean, they must be hauling,
So granite's the big one, right? So there's a lot of crushed rock and large granite stones coming off the hill. I mean, there's just a map. If you guys have ever been up there, there's more stone up there than we'll ever move in our lifetimes. But that's the biggest one. There's a fuel commodity. There's a lumber business. So there's some of that. That's obviously not the big business. The rock is the big business on this.
Yeah, it seems like 9 out of 10 of the
Yeah.
trains I see is just filled with that slag rock.
so other than somebody that has a side car or a side unload ability along that track, a business, like obviously it goes to the granite shed and they can load and unload granite, whatever they need to do, or is there a place to where, say, like Andy and I have a business and we wanna all of a sudden order in some stuff from Texas. Is there a place where our business could go and unload that train and do that? I mean, is there a place where another business that doesn't have a side rail car that could actually order product from that and go unload?
Yeah, so the one-offs like that, where they don't have their dedicated siding, will typically get unloaded in a yard. So Barry, there's a yard there, there's a couple of sidings there, they can pull it off to the side and figure out how to get it off the train right there in the Barry yard. So it depends on what it is, but I mean, one thing we don't get a lot of like boxcar, like smaller items. When we move stuff on trains, it's the big stuff, you know, it's the propane, it's the gas for your car, it's the rock, it's the.
I do know a business in Montpelier that was importing, they're a business based out of the Manchester, Vermont area, but they have a branch up here, and they're importing pellets, wood pellets from Canada. But they just there's an old granite shed here, it's no longer a granite shed, but they have the sidings. So they get the train car full of pellets, they park it there, and then they can pull their pellet truck up to it. So they're sort of using it for that, but they might only get a few cars a year that they park there.
And I will tell you, that's one of the great things about Vermont rail systems is, you know, the big guys, the big railroads, you know, if someone said, I got a customer that wants 3 cars a year, 4 cars a year, whatever. The big guys won't do that. Vermont rail system will do that. And I mean, I think that's why, if you look at Vermont rail and why they're successful, I think that's their customer service it's great. So whether they'll take, and it's good for the Vermont businesses because they start, like if you look at what happened in the Northeast Kingdom with Kuchar, right? They started out just a little bit, right? They started on Linden Yard. They've now outgrown Linden Yard. They're now up in Barton. They're expanding again. They started with a couple cars a year.
Now they have their own dedicated line to Park Peak. That thing's gonna be a mile long as far as another whole different line that they've got in there to store cars. So that's kind of what I was talking about is, you know, the opportunity. I mean, and they have, I don't know what their arrangement is, but they certainly have room to unload anything that they ever want to unload. They can order anything in the world and they have room for it.
Yeah. No, they've done well. So anyway, I think that's one of the great things about our rail system in Vermont is they're open to things.
And just a general question on the projects.
Yeah.
Do you do the same project selection process that we've heard about for road projects for both aviation and rail?
It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. So the criteria for, I'm assuming you're talking about VSP2 or whatever they call it. I can't remember.
Project selection.
Yeah. So basically, there's an asset management thing. So we have the similar criteria. The difference, like some of their criteria there, which we look at, but it's almost sometimes irrelevant. Like, can you get to the hospital? Can you get to the, you know, those things? We're not going to have a railroad that needs to get to a hospital. Although I will tell you that that hospital is probably going to need propane, or they're going to need fuel oil, or they're going to need something to generate. So it's looked at sort of, but we do the same process. It's not the same exact formula. And it also follows our state rail plan, and it follows our aviation plan, depending on what our state priorities are that's in the plan. So we look at all of that stuff. It's not just sort of like willy-nilly. We actually have a plan that we look at that had public input along the way, right? So our state rail plan had public input, our aviation plan public input. So
Any other projects you want to highlight?
well, there's a couple of platform projects in here. So the White River Junction platform is going to be built this year, and the Bellows Falls platform, for redoing those. They're older, got some bumps and things in it, and they are not ADA compliant currently, so they'll be ADA compliant. There are 19 FEMA projects in here, some new from the storm, some from storms previous. Before this year that have taken the last year or two to design. Now we're actually going to go to construction. So I think that's kind of the major stuff in here is the platforms, the build projects, the FEMA projects. There's, let's see, there's 10 different crossing projects in here. And the crossing projects will be, you know, typically are 80-20, 80% federal, 20% state.
I didn't remember seeing the TIB column before. Is that a separate TIB, or is that at some point we use TIB funds to fund rail projects?
We can, but if you're looking here, there's zero TIB funding in this
Right.
bill.
I just wondered in the past we
So
have taken TIB funding and
for sometimes
This is just the gas tax tip.
Yeah, but if, sometimes there's, well, some of our projects may qualify for that, in here we're not, but, sometimes we use it for, I think crossing projects, I think we use tip, I can't remember exactly, but we don't have any tip funding in this budget,
But it could.
but we have in the past, we have used tip in the past. Yeah, so our big things coming up, obviously Montreal, like we talked about, our corridor ID, so our national network. Not in this budget, because it doesn't have anything to do with our budget, but we've been participating for the last couple of years. You'll probably hear this. Brattleboro is getting a new station. It is running through the Amtrak station budget, so we are not funding it. It's coming through Amtrak's budget, although we've been involved in the design. They're just going to break ground on that this spring. It'll be the first high-level platform in the state. So you're going to be able to just walk from the car right straight on the platform. And how that's happening is the train's going to come up, it's going to go onto its designated siding at the station, and then it'll come back onto the main line. That's the whole reason we don't have high-level platforms around the state is a freight train is wider than a passenger train. So if the high-level platform was built on the main line, the freight train would take it out. It'd come and scrape it, break it off. So
So there you go.
Can you spend a few minutes while we have on how Amtrak's doing on ridership and, how they're doing?
And then, because it's so good, are you looking at expanding that, or are they looking at expanding the service more frequency?
So in our rail plan, we do talk about additional frequencies on both trains. We do not currently have a plan to ask for or try to do an additional service on either one right now, but in the future, it is in our rail plan. Ridership on the Vermonter, it's up a bit this year. I think we are 15 or 20% higher in the last quarter than last year. The Ethan Allen is down. We had the big push where everybody wanted to ride the train. Now the newness is kind of wearing off. I say down, it's not down a lot. I'm talking about, we're down 5-10% for the past quarter. But we're sustained. I think we're fine. I think it's just the newness is kind of worn off. Now we're just getting the regular.
And you had a couple issues with those buildings over in Albany.
So yeah, we didn't, but New York,
we had to deal with it.
We had to deal with it, and there was one just north of New York City this past quarter where we actually had to bust through there for a bit because there was a building that was not safe to run a train by. We had one in Albany, the same thing. That was on inaugural day.
Right, yeah.
That was working on that till midnight the day before, and that was terrible. But anyway, we got through it, and that building has been temporarily shored up, and we're running through Albany fine now. But then these things come up. I mean, that's part of railroading. On the Vermonter service, there's been a bunch of slow orders where, excuse me, like in South Royalton, where the highway, one of the highway projects is rebuilding the bridge over the road, the rail bridge over the road, the underpass. So we've had to slow down through there while they do construction, and eventually we're actually going to have to take a time where we actually suspend the train, let them put the new bridge in. Anyway. So there's things like that. One of the things that is in this budget is the Chrissy grant that New England Central got. Do you remember the derailment that they had in Northfield years and years ago? Well, anyway, there was an Amtrak derailment in Northfield. Train went down over the bank. It was because this boulder, the size of a Volkswagen Bug, rolled down the hill and ended up on the track. Train came around the curve, couldn't stop. That whole bank, that has been designed and all of the construction around that. So that has been a slow order. Trains have slowed down there since that has happened. In this budget, there's money to fix that whole bank, so that's slow order, so the train will speed up. So there's a few things like that in here, some safety money.
Yeah, because I thought every year we were working on some of this and to get the train just to go a little bit faster.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. And the Ethan Allen, we did some projects since it started. We're actually, right now, I can't announce it yet because I don't have the final one, but we're actually going to decrease the runtime from Burlington to Rutland. So we're actually going to take some time out of that schedule. It's going to go faster.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, well, thanks, Dan. That was helpful as usual.
Yeah, that was good.
If you have a further question, just
Oh, there's Senator
let me
Mazza.
know.
How to get hold of you.
You know how to get me. Good.
Okay. So we'll jump right into more rails and take a break after this. Is that okay?
Make it a break.
Just a link into the Zoom here.
Oh, you're gonna use your laptop, Dan? We got one.
Either way, Dan, if you want to, you can.
Well, you can't plug in. You gotta link into Zoom.
If you have yours, we can do it.
Yeah.
We have it all on a thumb drive, whatever's easiest.
It's the one I sent last night, right?
State service.
How is everyone? Did you folks, did you get calendars this year?
We did.
So want some more?
I think there's.
Yeah, I actually need one right here. Actually, my wife was looking for that the other day and I said,
Yeah.
well,
There's some over here on the window
Pull that out of the chairs. I'll sit here and do this. Tag team this thing.
Yeah. Finally sun this week, huh?
yeah, that's nice.
So we have Senator Mazza on the screen and you know everybody, Sheldon. Right?
Yes. Hello.
It was the cloudiest January on record, is what I heard.
Was it?
Yeah. The sun we've ever had.
Too busy working.
Really test all our solar stuff along the railroads. But so far, so good. We're watching it pretty closely, so.
Oh, yeah, because you have solar powered signaling and stuff?
All the stuff we did for the switches for the Ethan Allen, it's all solar. So this was the first really big test of everything holding up. So far, so good. Only a couple batteries we have to do.
But the battery still had enough juice.
Yeah, there were a couple in rock cuts and stuff. You swap them out with one that's in better sunlight. But yeah, I didn't have to do too many so far.
So is this presentation that you're working on, Dan, submitted to the meeting?
Yeah, it's on the
Yes,
website.
yeah, it's on the website.
Just in case anybody's watching, they can go on, is it under Dan's name or under Sheldon?
Doing an update.
And apparently I have to.
We have them with a laptop if you want
But there's no place to.
Copy from the LG's
We
office.
do, yeah, and this,
Powering one?
No, there's no place to like.
Are you on the Wi-Fi?
you have to do a Zoom. connection.
I'm getting into Zoom right now. I'm
Okay.
opening Zoom right
In the
now.
house, you can connect to the screen, but in this Senate, we don't have that.
Unfortunately, my Zoom said I can't open it without doing a quick update, so that's what's doing. Apparently I haven't been on Zoom.
You're a Teams guy.
Yeah, I am a Teams guy. I am a Teams guy.
We know who you hang with.
And yes, I'm on the state, public Wi-Fi instead of my own. I could use my, crossbar.
Do you still have the store up in Orleans?
I don't,
Okay.
but that was just a great thing. That train would stop every day. Those guys would come in and, I mean, where in the world do you have a train that stops at the business with your store? And they did every day.
was thinking of you this, when we're up there this fall, we brought a bunch of private cars up to Newport from all over the country.
Yeah.
And they actually overnighted in Orleans.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks went over to the stores and everything there. So I was thinking of you when everyone was there.
They were just a great bunch of guys too. They were good. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They probably still stop there. I think it's still.
Yeah.
Well, Sheldon, if you wanted, you could just introduce yourself for the record as we try to get this going. And
Yeah.
give us any other background before we need.
Yeah, so Selvin Houghton, President, Vermont Rail System, and the updates on here. Dan has a presentation he had put together from V-Trans for all the flooding, and we had one we did as well. Pretty much a lot of overlap, but we're going to use the one Dan did laid out a little better to follow the rail lines here. But I think the biggest thing is it's very much a team effort between us and V-Trans, right? I mean, the flooding we saw this year was comparable to Irene, and I never thought I would see this type of thing again. And you know, a lot of the lessons we learned from Irene with FEMA, right? Because FEMA was covering all of this, how we document everything, how we get everything presented with them. So when it comes to all the reimbursement, that goes well. So Dan and I were talking every 5 minutes on this response. His staff was out with our folks looking at all these sites, documenting it, pictures, just to make the process after the railroads were opened easier for the billing part of it. And we're still working, that's process is still going on, but I would say, Dan, I think a lot of those efforts paid off. You know?
They really did. One of the things about Irene is we learned a lot, right? So when something like this happens again, I think, how the railroad, how V-Trans, how we approach the initial inspection, you take the initial inspection, and then you basically create what's called like a project worksheet for FEMA. FEMA has to approve that. And so all of that stuff at the end, we get reimbursed for, or whatever percentage, it's not all of it, but depending on the storm and the size of the storm, and it could be 75-25. This particular one, we're forecasting 90-10 for the projects long term. So.
When you're rebuilding, when you're going through and correcting after these major storms, are we making them better? So are you taking those opportunities to be more resilient in the future?
Absolutely, and I think we saw that pay off in December with some of the stuff we did in July, because we came within an inch of having problems again with rain that December 18th storm. And for example, the culvert in Ludlow that you'll see, I mean, that was increased in size, brand new head wall and everything, and that was at least half capacity in that December 18th storm when water was starting to go over 103 again, and the railroad was doing fine. So absolutely upsizing the culverts, arboring up the slopes. Absolutely, we're doing that type of thing.
Yeah, so that there's some criteria that FEMA, like, they don't let you just like overbuild, right? So we have to be very careful when we look at how we design a repair. We definitely look at resiliency. They will pay for some, upsizing. For example, they'll typically say, all right, that was this certain size culvert. We don't have to go through a lot if you just upsize it one, right? One size bigger. They're not going to give you a hard time. If you need more than that, then they make you and they should, right? We got to look at the hydraulics report. We got to do a lot more of engineering, and then if you can justify the cost of the upgrade, then they're involved. So we do that.
We also, what is it, they still do the 50% of what was spent on the site you can use towards mitigation as well after the initial repair.
That's a sort of a general rule, but they have to approve all this stuff. We have to do what's called a project worksheet. So not only am I talking to Selvin every 5 minutes, we're talking to FEMA every 10 minutes and say, these are the projects, right? So it's, yeah. All right, how do I share here? Share.
I saw one picture where the rail was in 19 days, you put it back in shape again. It got washed out there. That was quite impressive,
Yep, that was the Green Mountain Railroad. I think we beat Irene by 2 days on the Green Mountain.
Did a good job.
Can I share my life?
Yeah, I need you to come up.
Okay.
Do you see that?
Yep, here's the share button, got it. Yeah, let me go to slideshow. is that right? Okay, got it. All right. I think we kind of just went through a little bit of the background, but Sutherland, you wanna?
Yeah, so, just kind of, cut some of this stuff here, I'll have Dan, have you do some of it too. So as we talked about, I mean, we saw rains comparable to Irene, and I think looking at the rainfall on the map, you can see that, you can see the Green Mountain line down there in the southern part of the state. That, we had 5-6 inches of rain on that railroad, and coming off that hill, it just comes down at a good speed, hits the culverts and debris with it. That's what happened in Ludlow. A stump went into the big culvert in Ludlow, plugged it up, water dammed up 30 some odd feet, and just took the whole slope out. So, you know, the lines in the valleys, of course, saw all this rain in a day or so. Water came up, goes back down, erodes the rail lines, and see right there is the rain event we all witnessed over a period of a couple of days. And I think the thing with this event is it wasn't just one event. You know, every week we were seeing rainstorms, even as we were doing the repairs. So it was very challenging. Dan, if you want to, I mean, I know you guys did the apps and the tracking. It was all V-Trans. Let you speak to that.
Yeah, so what we did is we have a team that goes out with Selden's group, and we assess every site. So FEMA requires, if there's a location, that you have to identify that as an individual site. They have to approve that site. So in this particular one, there were 225 damaged sites. 65 of those sites were debris only. So things just went on the track, just covered up the track. 160 of those 225 actually required like some sort of construction, some rebuilding of some sort. So this is actually not right. I didn't update my slide from another presentation. It says 105 sites are complete with 55 ongoing. There's actually only about 20 that are ongoing. The rest of them are done. Yeah, rail damage happened in 23 different Vermont towns. 123 miles out of the 298 state-owned, VRS leased active rail lines were affected, so 41%. And 25 culverts, 25 bridges, 32 culverts were affected out of that storm, so quite a bit. What we do at V-Trans is we take all that information and we have to actually send this stuff to Vermont Emergency Management. So as this stuff is happening, they're saying what's happening on the highways. Well, we're reporting what's happening on the railroads, not just state-owned. So we're also talking about privately owned railroads. So every site goes on a GPS, and then we talk about, well, if there's something on a rail line, that just because it maybe there's 10 sites right in the middle, well, it shuts the whole rail line down. So we have to report up how many miles of rail line actually are open or closed. And we were doing this in the morning and at night. We have what we called sync meetings with Vermont Emergency Management, and we were keeping this dashboard like this. We were keeping this updated every single day, twice a day. There's 2 Amtrak services, as we mentioned, one on a Vermont Rail System line and one on the New England Central, so private. And we had those restored. Ethan Allen restored on July 15th, on the 19th. So pretty quick turnaround to get the Amtrak service back running again. We actually suspended the Ethan Allen again after this because it was high water in the Middlebury area on the Otter Creek, but nothing significant. It was more precautionary than anything, but high water came back up. As Selden said, we weren't dealing with just those 2 days of rain. It never stopped raining. It just kept coming.
You know, Otter Creek were levels that we didn't even see during Irene, and we had water coming up over the tracks or close to going over the tracks in areas that hadn't been like that since the 1927 flood. And that's what caused some issues with Amtrak even after we had the repair specs and work done.
Yeah, so just a quick stat. So 58% of Vermont rail lines, and this is both state-owned and public, were closed. But within a week, we were down to only 11%. So pretty quick. And then then we had the Green Mountain, which you'll see in a little bit. The Green Mountain and the Little Whacker out here. Those took a little longer.
So one of the other things, why we're working on looking at all this flood damage and how we're going to deal with all that, was we got all our freight traffic. What are we going to do with all that? Bellows Falls was disconnected from the network because the Green Mountain Railroad had so much damage. Our connection down to Hoosick Junction was impacted for damage that happened on the B&R line from Rutland down to Hoosick. So one of the things that I was doing at the time is we're calling all our connecting railroads. Hey, we need to get traffic in and out of here. So the line was good from Rutland out to Whitehall. That connection was still active. And the Vermont Railway from Rutland to Burlington, while it had some damage, we were mainly waiting for the Otter Creek to come up and go back down. So we ended up working with Canadian Pacific Railway, and traffic that normally would have gone down to Hoosick Junction, we gave them in Whitehall, New York for a period of a week, and they brought that further south down into Binghamton. So that's the red line you see there. That was one of our detours. The purple detour was traffic that we had that was going to go to the Connecticut River line, Newport down to White River. So things were in place from Bellows Falls up to White River, and the Conn River line from Newport to White River didn't have much damage at all. So we took a lot of the traffic that was going to that line. We asked CP, hey, can you bring it up to Montreal, hand it off to us at Newport. So that Newport gateway became very important to getting product back into Vermont, going up through Canada and coming back in. And that's the purple line you see.
It goes right by my house.
Yeah, so we utilized that to get traffic on the Conn River line that we normally would have gone down to Bellows Falls and gone up to New England Central. So the other thing we did is once the B&R was opened up in about a week, the blue line you see, is we worked out a deal with Pan Am Southern, who, if you recall, we had helped them with the Hoosick Tunnel back in 2020 when they had the tunnel collapse. They routed traffic over the Green Mountain to B&R. I said, hey guys, I need the same favor. And they took our traffic. When we were able to go back down to Hoosick again, they brought it down through Massachusetts and up to Bellows Falls for us while we were still repairing the Green Mountain for a couple more weeks. So those were some really important things we were doing to keep all the freight traffic flowing. We never had to embargo any of the rail lines, and we were able to keep all the customers fluid. So that was another big thing. So then
we're gonna get into some pictures about what we saw on our initial, and we went out to look at each one of these sites. We didn't know what we were gonna find. So I'm gonna run through this really quickly. And we organized this by rail line. So Bennington to Rutland subdivision, this wasn't one of the ones that was hit the hardest. But this is the kind of stuff that, we saw when we went out there with the railroad. So our team and the railroad were out taking these pictures. There was high water, there was debris up in the structures, there was washouts. And as we've laid this out, if you look at the top bar on this, I'm doing this by milepost. So going from south to north, these are different sites, but these are by milepost. So you can kind of see what we were seeing as we went up the railroad, and we could actually see what we were, on the initial damage assessment, this is what we found. And again, this is not our worst railroad that was damaged. This was one of the ones that had a lot of high water. This was probably one of those. Bridge 94, this is in Clarendon, had to dump a whole bunch of rock behind the abutment.
these two spots are worse right here than we,
Not running a train through here.
Yep.
The sun shining, is this when the water was the highest?
yeah, the next day.
This was like the 11th, I thought, or this was 12th or 13th, something like that. But
One of the things we did is we took a helicopter out, literally as soon as the cloud cover came out, we were out in a helicopter over every one of these rail lines. What are we looking at? How long do we think it's gonna be to repair them? So we can make decisions about those detours and what the strategy looked like. But the B&R, other than that one last spot Dan just showed, was mainly just filling in, the cribs and the ballast. We had one big hole to fill in Clarendon. And that took a couple days, but we had the B&R line functioning by the weekend. And we were able to get down to Hoosick.
We're talking about a community field trip on a train, let's do that.
you get along the whole. So this is the VTR north of Rutland. So this is Amtrak runs on this line. So this is what we were dealing with to get the Ethan Allen back running. Again, this is not the highest or heaviest damage line that we saw. Again, you can follow the milepost. These, and I didn't put every single milepost in here, but this is why that was why the
Looks like a boat launch.
Yeah.
It's all Pittsford Proctor area. And the challenge there isn't so much the flow of the water, it's just the Otter Creek. That's its floodplain. So as it comes from East Dorset, everything comes off the mountains. We just wait, and it's usually several days later, you just wait for the water to come up in those areas, and come back down, and it's just patience. And when it comes back down, it erodes the ballast a little bit, and we have to fill it back in, but that was about a week process as well.
So, yeah, so Selden was saying that as the water comes up and it goes down fairly slowly, we get erosion. This is the Green Mountain line that you're about to see very different. So now we're talking about a lot of water coming off the hills, coming into the railroad, water's moving a lot
What's
faster.
the end
Cares.
point on that?
That milepost is 8.6. So this is just north of Rockingham. This is, so as we're coming out of Bellows Falls towards Rutland on the Green Mountain. So if you follow that, milepost 8.6. A lot of debris, Bridge 112.
Was that a refrigerator?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of those.
Snowmobile trailers, dumpsters, refrigerators, you name it. It's unreal. What's also amazing down in the Green Mountain, boulders the size of this table were put in the 1927 flood, and you find those picked up and moved. It's just incredible.
This is Bridge 119, and if you actually looked in the budget that I just presented, there's actually two projects. One's a FEMA project on this bridge for an abutment, and the other one was a previously designed project that we were getting ready to do for the other end of the bridge, the other abutment. So a lot of debris, a lot of scour. I'm going to run through these. I'm not going to stop at every one of these because we don't have time, but gives you an idea of the initial damage assessments as we came up from Rockingham towards Rutland. And again, Green Mountain line was one of the heavily damaged railroads, which took extra time. But this is normal stuff right here that we saw.
A lot of this Green Mountain was like Irene. It's almost all over again.
A lot of debris. There were some where the railroad intersected with the roads. Obviously, water would rush right down the roads and take out crossings. As Selden was saying, lots of debris. So this particular one,
Proctorsville.
Cavendish took the brunt of
Proctorsville, Cavendish were pretty heavily hit. Gassets, that area.
you guys can see my cursor. As Selden was saying, that's a snowmobile trailer with a couple of snowmobiles in it, washed up against the bridge.
So you restored service within 11 days, I think you said, or 5 weeks total. Everything was back within 5 weeks, but passenger rail was within 11 days. Were there things, equipment that you didn't have that would have expedited it faster that is part of the budget request or things you're thinking about in the future for emergency response?
I'd say one of the things we did is while the rain was coming down that Monday, we were making calls to all of our local contractors and stuff that we work with. And we were saying, look, we see this coming. Can we get you positioned down in Bellows Falls? Can we get you positioned in Ludlow? Get you positioned in Clarendon? So all of our local folks we were talking to, they're also procuring materials, culverts and everything. We're talking with some of the suppliers in Saratoga. Hey, what do you have for culverts? I want to put my name on them. We're probably going to need them. So we were doing a lot of that. We did have to bring in some external resources. RJ Corman, they're a big company. They have a whole storm response team. They rebuilt CSX after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. So we leveraged them to bring in some more specialized equipment, rotary dumps and stuff, which we don't have. And it is something we are looking at, having a few of our own here. Some of the local contractors have them, but we definitely needed more than what was available. And so we did use some outside resources to get more of that equipment in.
Sadly, we can expect this to happen again.
Unfortunately, I would agree.
So this is the line right out here, the initial damage. So over by Casella's, the river it jumped the banks and it washed all their dumpsters on the road. And the difference between this line and the Green Mountain was this particular line was a lot about sediment. It just washed a lot of junk into the tracks. And how railroads work is there's the subbase, which is supporting, and then you have ballast, which is there to hold the ties and all that stuff in place, but it has to drain. You can't hold water in that. Well, as soon as you get all this silt, it just ruins the ballast, and the ballast has to be replaced. So this is a typical.
the ballast is the rock
stone.
underneath the ties.
Underneath and around the ties. So it chinks all those ties into place and holds them in place, which holds the rails, which is what the trains run on. So this is coming into Barry. As Selden was saying, it would just move everything. cars were just all over the place. This is out behind Times Argus. There's a photo, coming into Barry. Again, the tracks are gone. There were tracks in here. I mean, they're there, but they're just covered. And all that stuff has to be cleaned out. This is going up the hill, up into Graniteville. So that was the initial, I just showed you, and I didn't show you all of them, right? There's 225 sites, and I didn't show you 225 sites there. That was the initial damage assessment to give you kind of an idea. Now let's talk about sort of the befores and afters. So what we did is, again, we're working with Zeldin. We put out contracts to Green Mountain Railroad to say, these are now we know the sites. Now we're going to have to hire somebody. We hired Green Mountain Railroad to do the work. So all the subcontractors Zeldin was talking about. So on the Green Mountain line, we hired Green Mountain Railroad to do the work. So there's the before, there's the after. These are some of the befores and afters about what we did or what they did and what we were working with them on. You can kind of see a big difference, right? Same locations, just the befores and the afters. On the Washington County Railroad, the state of Vermont hired R.J. Corman to do that work. And this is kind of some of the befores and afters of what they did there. And I'm not in, so far, just so you know, I haven't included the very large sites. I'm including the typicals in the slides you've seen so far. Now let's go to the large sites. So Bridge 119, I was talking about that earlier. This abutment obviously didn't look like that before the storm. It was just destroyed the stone there. So also look at the timeline. At the top of this, I'm showing you the site, but I'm also showing you the timeline. So on July 18th, this is what it looked like. And Zeldin's group was working on doing a temporary repair here.
One thing I mentioned, you talked about technology and what can we do differently. One of the things that was challenging was the bridges and the bridge abutments, right? Because that water, when you get out there after the storm, the water's still high and just brown. And so some of this damage that we're showing you couldn't see initially. So we're going out looking at bridges, the bridge is all there, but you're not seeing what's going on underneath. So one of the things would be sonar technologies. What can you do? We actually, as the water went down, had to put some divers in to take a look at some of these abutments. And is there technology out there that we can use to kind of get a mapping of this? And you'll know, several days makes a big difference when you're trying to do a recovery in a matter of weeks. So that's another place for technology, I think, that.
Maybe underwater drones, less risky.
Something to that effect.
So turbulent, probably hard to take a picture.
Yeah. This is the turbulence and the mud.
So Dan, when you were talking about the state, was that just for the state-owned railroads or for all the railroads because of FEMA or something?
All we dealt with, well, we coordinated and tried to help the New England Central with if they needed a culvert they couldn't get or something like that. But we didn't actually solicit or pay for any of the damage on those railroads because they're privately owned. FEMA only pays for state-owned assets,
right,
which is what this is here. So as you can see, July 20th here, they've got temporary abutments already in the river.
FEMA pay for graffiti removal?
We didn't put that in our project, no. July 21st. So July 21st, Vermont Rail Systems ran their first train over this bridge. Pretty quick. Bridge 119.
And that was to get up to Ludlow. We have a customer there. So when I talked about all the detours and everything we're doing, we had one customer at Ludlow that was isolated. There was nothing we could do, So one of the goals was, can we get out of Rutland quicker to get to them, or can we get out of Bellows Falls quicker? So we said, well, Bellows Falls, we're gonna get quicker. We had R.J. Corman down there working as a sub for us, working on that. And that bridge was the one linchpin. We got to get this done to get up to Ludlow.
Perfect example about what Zeldin was talking about earlier is the initial assessment you couldn't see, right? The water level was up, probably up a little higher, about where that top structural member is here. We couldn't see that these blocks were missing in our initial assessment. So now here we are on July 26th where the water's gone down. We can see a little more. And we started getting in the river and started poking around a little more.
What river is that?
Black River.
Is it the Black?
Yeah, maybe, yeah, Black River.
Williams is.
Yeah.
So we found more damage than we thought we had on this particular bridge. So we ended up we again hired Green Mountain Railroad they had to put some additional supports under one side of this. This is now one of our long-term projects in our budget as far as replacing that abutment. So that's what's there now as a temporary. We have those, all that shoring up on the one side.
So this is all hopefully owned, subject to the FEMA reimbursement. Then.
Correct.
What is the total FEMA estimated?
So our initial damage overall on all of our state-owned railroads was around 50 million. We have another long-term to continue from our initial getting the railroads open. There's another a little over $10 million in permanent repairs that still needs to be done.
But 50 million would be subject to the FEMA.
And the additional 10 million also. They'll pay, yeah, so all of that. So
There's the 90-10.
yeah, so 90-10 match on about $60 million.
And the 10% is it
State.
shared at all with the operator, or is it all on the state?
Doesn't expose culvert.
Okay, so here's you guys have probably seen this one this one was in the media a lot. This is in Ludlow going up to Okemo. This was so it's a 4 foot by 6 foot stone arch culvert got plugged up, and then so this is the culvert, but there's that's how far the rails are.
That was the one everybody looked at.
Everybody saw this one, right? So we're on July 10th right here.
Looks safe.
All that fill ended up.
You have to get
in
a
the marketplace.
That's a fairly good size excavator that's down in the hole, and it looks like a toy, right? So it's quite far up, and so this was a huge project.
But is that continuous
No,
welded rail?
it's all jointed, so the joints are held together by joint bars here.
Because I'm surprised it held. What a weight.
Surprised what the rail could take. It is surprising.
So here, obviously they cut the rails on each end, so it's no longer up in the air, so they can work safely. We procured an 8 foot steel culvert to replace the 4 foot by 6 foot culvert. So we upsized the culvert quite a bit here. The hydraulic analysis did support that. And then we had to set the culvert, or they set the culvert, and excuse me, and then just started filling it in. And you can follow the timeline, July 19th. I'll go fairly quickly through this, but July 20th.
Well, that steel doesn't look as sturdy as those rocks, but you're saying the steel is better construction, it's gonna last longer, more resilient?
Then
The engineering on that, yeah, that steel cover, yeah, it's the corrugated steel, that's engineered to hold that. Absolutely.
We welded all those sections together too, in addition to a band that goes around it as well.
well, what's the lifespan on that culvert? That's gonna be a lot to unearth, isn't it?
It sure is.
Well,
It will, I don't,
stone, as long as it's
It'll last longer than
there,
me.
lasts from the Roman Empire, so I'm not sure that has the same lifespan. How would you even excavate?
Is there a
it?
license for those?
I'm sure there is, I don't know.
40 years.
Yeah, I know what it is. but-
Part of it too is, I mean, to put in the precast or the stone, you can't get the line open quickly, right? Having to do all that. Part of it was how quickly you procure some of the stuff to get the subgrade built back up. But I mean, those easily have 100-year lifespan on
Probably,
CMP culverts, you know.
There's a lot of those under the interstate.
I guess I won't worry about it.
I'm not gonna worry about it.
You might, you might, Jane, it wouldn't shock me.
So here they are, July 27th, setting the actual tracks back up on top of the hill, so. And then July 31st, they ran their first train through there. Obviously, that was just to get the line open, a significant amount more work to do
So
on.
the flood date to when it got opened was 3 weeks?
19 days.
19 days, well, just
Yep.
shy. Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty impressive.
This site was actually about 17 days because it was East Wallingford. It was a 19-day site.
The next one I'm
Yeah.
gonna show you.
Yeah.
So, they continued to work through this site. Then August 4th, we had another very large storm. We had to actually kind of start over on some of the outlet ends, washed away a lot of the stuff. So, that was what we fought with all summer long. And a lot of our sites, is you build it, it washed away, and we then rebuild it. So,
Yeah, that bridge down at Bridge 119, when we first excavated out around that abutment, I think it was July 17th or something, there was a flash flood and we were driving up 103. It was unreal. The water came up several feet. All the work we'd done that day, the coffer dam went right over it, and we had to start fresh the next morning all over again. And it was crazy.
So some of the tools that the railroad and the
That
contractors use.
raises the question about when you did the repair, the extent to which you were engineering and resilience for the future flood. That raises that question.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, this particular one was a 4-foot by 6-foot culvert when flood hit. It's now an 8-foot culvert. So we've upsized the culvert quite a bit. And, when we had the December storm, this culvert handled it just fine. So again,
Like the culvert in Brandon. Huh?
Culvert in Brandon.
Yeah, that was one of the things they did after Irene.
Oh, right, yeah,
They
right.
upsized the, in the town of Brandon, downtown.
Yeah, that culvert was only half full on December 18th when the water was going over Route 103 though. So it definitely paid off immediately there.
So this is how they moved a lot of the stone quickly on the actual. So, and then we went into more of a permanent repair on the inlet end. They had to actually pour a concrete head wall. That's what this process is. You can follow September 13th where it's on the head wall there. So then they had to do, they worked past September 13th, but that's the majority of the work on the large washout in Ludlow. We were talking about the Wallingford site. This was just destroyed the bank, and it just undermined the entire bank there. So there was no support for the rail, and it was hanging there.
And this site was moving for 3 days before it finally stabilized. Initially, all the track wasn't sagging, and you could just watch it moving.
One of the
Like
challenges.
those house on the ocean front in California where you watch them.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Same thing. So what'd you do? Have to move the roadbed?
So no, so this
No.
one of the
Stabilize
challenges.
the bank?
Yes, we
One of the-
kept stabilizing, yeah.
Man, it must have taken some big rock there.
Well, you're about to see it.
Yeah.
I'm going to show it to you. And one of the challenging things here was access, right? So you couldn't access it from the rail side. You actually had to come from the other side of the river. So they had to build a little bit of a temporary road across the river just to get to the site. That was one of the challenging. And then you just start building it back up with all this large rock, all those big trucks coming in. They would dump it into this site, and then they would have to take that all-terrain dump truck to get it over the river and then up on the bank where you can see that very, very large excavator. It looks like a little excavator. That's huge. That's a big one. Moving all that. So again, follow the timeline, July 28th. It's getting back up there. One of the things as far as resiliency, there was only one culvert in this location on the initial. We added 2 extra ones. So you can see in this culvert, there's 3 culverts. So if water comes up again, it shouldn't go
So
over the
that's
top.
resiliency.
So yeah, so we've added a little extra hydraulic capacity in this area. So
It goes through the first one. If it gets too high on that one, there's the next one a little higher up, and one above that.
I mean, that particular location probably was less about the water from up top. It was more about the river water, but there was water coming from the field on the other side and onto this. So it did wash from kind of both sides. And again, July 31st, first train.
The work was done a couple days ahead of the first train. I think we finished up on a Saturday and ran the first train on
So how
Monday
many
morning.
days on that?
That was the 19 days.
19.
It was 19 days from the start of the event till when we could run a train.
And we had to take the temporary road out of the river and restore the riverbank. So here it is, August 4th. So here in Berlin, some of the larger sites here, Bridge 308, 307, which was just beyond Casella. What you can't see here, water's still murky and high. What you can't see here is at the end of this, we have a diver in the river. You can see it. That's when we kind of found out that underneath that abutment, you could actually reach in underneath that abutment about 6 to 8 feet. There was nothing holding that up. So we had to actually do what's called a tremie pour, and we had to. But first we had to get water stop going in there. So we built this kind of dam around the abutment, and then we started pumping water out, which we struggled with for a bit. And then we had to pour underneath that. We just kind of filled underneath it with concrete. You can see here, we just filled underneath that abutment with concrete until it stopped coming out. So then we had to secure all those loose stones on the abutment because the water had washed all the grout out that was around the stones. So we had to shotcrete that and hold them together to stabilize that abutment. But here we are, August 21st. That abutment was essentially done on August 21st. Down in the yard, again, it was just debris. We had to get so much silt. We had to undercut the ties, which is like this undercutter, which is like a big monster chainsaw, goes underneath the ties, pulls all the muck and everything out from underneath there, so that we can put new ballast in underneath coming into Barre. So you've seen some of these already, but these were just, this is one of the high rail dump trucks just coming in and dumping new ballast in that area. I do have a couple of pictures of kind of before and after on the yard, which I think I'll go quickly.
Our train was actually, we had just run the train over there, left it in Barre. Our conductor was still in the engine house. It heard the water coming down the hill. And the train was all dry in Barre. The engineer was 15 minutes away. We tried to get the engineer back. By the time he got to Barre, the interstate was closing and there was 4 feet of water on that train. And so we ended up having 2 locomotives. We're still waiting. We got to change all the trucks on it. And all the rail cars had to get the wheels changed. So RJ Corman, they did that type of work as well for us.
In this particular
Because
site,
they were underwater.
Yep, because they're underwater and the water ruins the bearings on the wheels. Yep.
in this particular site, I just wanted to show you, in some cases, we actually had to pull the track out and use machinery to get all the dirt and muck and everything, and then put new ballast down and then move the tracks back in. So there were a couple different things. Here's the train that Selden was just talking about. This train was stranded.
That's kind of stuff that the church,
Yeah, there's a perfect example of what moves on that line, a large stone. So this train was damaged in the flood.
Those stones are actually an Army Corps projects on the Great Lakes for resiliency work. That's where all the stone is going. They're building up jetties and armoring up shorelines on the Great Lakes.
Stones out there?
They like this granite just because it's less abrasive, and all that rock we have here is ideal for what they're doing in the Great Lakes.
so you send it everywhere, like there was a big jetty project in Florida a few years ago. And
We did go down to Florida with some, yes.
Got good rocks up here.
yeah,
Long Island, and they're talking about using some in Long Island. So there's a tremendous amount of demand for this rock.
There's just heaps of it
yeah.
on the hill, right, in Washington.
It'll keep this railroad busy for a long time.
Up on the hill, we talked about these sites. We actually had to kind of build a road to get down to it. Couldn't even get to it. It was, and the terrain was tough. So anyway, this is just to wrap up. We didn't show you everything, but should have given you a pretty good flavor about how our summer went this past year. So that's it.
And I think it paid off in December because that was a pretty heavy rain we had December 18th, and we were nervous and everything held up. So it was good.
You had no closures that day.
Nope, we had a few little small washouts down in the East Dorset area that were a day, but nothing major.
What was the cost of that project? All that work done, what was the cost of that?
So our initial was around $50 million. We're still getting exact, not every, believe it or not all our invoices are actually in to get actual costs, but our estimates were 50 million on all that.
Wow.
And I didn't show you everything.
That's less than the drawbridge, Senator Mazza.
That's right.
How do I stop sharing?
It's the same, but
No, I don't want to leave.
Please ask it.
Okay.
there's one over here.
Thank you. You did it for me. Thank you. All right, so that's the report on storm damage on our rails.
A lot of
Thank you.
damage.
Yeah, it's good to see those photos.
Yeah, again, we have a good partner, Vermont Rail System. We work well together.
So actually, for $5 million, we probably made improvements on the line that are desirable long-term. So it wasn't all bad news. I mean, there's some long-term benefit for the work that you've done on the rail bed, I would assume.
Yeah, for sure.
Look to the future.
Yes, and I was explaining when I was talking about my budget, we had Bridge 119 as a long-term project, but
119, we don't know.
it's a bridge
I
number.
don't even remember the exit numbers on the interstate.
Yeah.
Bridge in Chester.
It's a bridge in Chester,
Thank
so the project,
In the
well,
book, we talked about.
yeah, so the project included an abutment project on both ends.
You mean if I opened the book, I should be opening the book?
No, just earlier, he was saying
So the fee.
it would have been more.
It
state
would have been
money.
more state money because FEMA's now paying for one end of that project because it didn't hold up through the storm, so.
Yeah, okay.
All right, great.
So we want storms just to store bridges that are on the project, in the book.
Yeah, that's right.
If only.
If we get direct,
If only, right?
We could get Mother Nature to.
so you guys probably lost a lot of sleep and did a lot of extra work over the summer.
It was a long summer. It was a busy July and August, a little lie. But great, as Dan said, great team effort, great work with the V-Trans folks, and none of us could have done it without each other.
So the contractors were all Vermont, or did you have to bring in outside expertise?
We use primarily Vermont, RJ Corman, who is a major railroad contractor. They have a storm recovery team. So
And they're out of where?
they're out of Lexington, Kentucky, or Nicholasville, Kentucky, near Lexington.
Oh,
They also do derailment work and everything. They do a lot of specialized stuff. So we brought them in to help do a little bit of work on the Green Mountain with those rotary dump trucks. But that's pretty helpful for this type of thing. And then as Dan said, V-Trans hired them to do the line over here. But they rebuilt CSX in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. So they do a lot of pretty big stuff. And then we use them to do all the rail car repairs here in Barry, to pick the cars up, swap the wheels out, and they're going to come back and do the locomotives for us in the next month or so once the parts for the engines are in.
They sent crews they had crews in New York City, they had crews in Tennessee, they had crews all over the country that came here. When we called them, said, hey,
that's
what?
specialized.
Yeah, 'cause, yeah, not everybody has these toys that I just showed you.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that they,
We used them during Irene as well. They came up and did the Green Mountain and the B&R during Irene for us. But that's after we've tapped out all the Vermont resources, all that we use all those folks first, so.
A lot of stone was laid everywhere. Because you had that one Ludlow project, but there was several washouts like that where whole mountains are gone. You had to fill it back in.
I didn't show you everything, right?
Yeah.
We showed you.
When there's all the road projects, in
Sample.
addition to all the rail projects. So just
Yeah.
the amount of trucking of stone.
60,000 plus tons of material into the railroads in that time period, It's incredible.
where did it all come from? Barry?
We had a pit in Ludlow we used. Certainly some of the rock for this road came up the hill in Barry, a lot of it out of South Wallingford. And out of Cold River, right in New Hampshire, right.
Because I hear from towns about getting gravel for roads are having more and more difficult. I guess your specifications are a little different.
Yeah, and there's one quarry we reactivated for this in Ludlow because that big, it would take a long time to truck it any distance. So basically there's a quarry several miles away, reactivated it, and those haul trucks are running from that quarry just all day.
Yeah, but in Marshfield, they did that. All right, thanks. Any other questions for rail folks? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, good to see you guys.
Yep, likewise.
We're late.
Yeah, we'll be back up there on the train as well.
So we can go off the line. We've adjourned for the day. We succeeded.
Did you have another one?
How are you?
You have ACLU coming
Oh,
in?
no, we have enough of them. We have, we're gonna have a break.
I have.
Not a jam, adjourn.
Okay.